Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everything in between. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and on this magnificent Monday, I'm joined by the two young, feisty, fiery lions of the Institute of Race Relations, Mr. Hermann Pretorius. Hermann, how are you?
I am well, and I was okay a few minutes ago, but then I was called a feisty young lion, so now I'm just, that's going into my Tinder profile. I don't have a Tinder profile, by the way. It just one day when I get one, when loneliness has caught up with me, that'll be.
You got to get with the times, Herman.
The problem is, I genuinely wanted to sign up, and then they said you need at least 2 photographs of yourself that you're happy with, and I'm saying that's a high bar. I'd one and a half at best.
And of course, we are also joined by Mr. Gabriel Crouse, who is not single.
Feeling fabulous. What a way to Monday it.
Indeed. Right. Let us start off with the news of the day. So we've got a story that I know Herman is very passionate about. We're going to do that second because we don't want it to run out of energy. And that is, of course, our friends in the economic freedom fighters. And by friends, I mean nemesis, are threatening to shut down UNISA because the higher education minister, Bladen Zamande, has decided to limit the number of first-time students that will be accepted by the university by 20,000 this year. The chairperson of the EFF Student Command vowed that UNISA will not proceed with the academic year if judgment is reserved by the court and it turns out to be unacceptable to them. So this is now in court. It's being challenged. The minister's decision is being challenged, and the EFF says that if the court does not agree with their position, which is that these students should be administered, then they will shut down the campus. EFF students were protesting outside the High Court in Madiba Street, where they marched. So this is an interesting case because this is a story we get basically every single year with schools and with universities. I don't know if you guys remember, but UJ had a stampede actually a couple of years ago when sort of late registrations came to try and get in to UJ at the last minute, and there was a stampede and some people got killed. So Gabriel, I'm going to start with you. What do you think of what the EFF is doing here, and what do you think about this issue of limiting student numbers in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's very... On the face of it, it seems obvious that if the EFF is against something, then it must be a good idea. My only hesitation about that is it's not clear to me whether Bladen Zamande is interfering in the university unduly. It really should, academic independence first and foremost. UNISA should be able to define its limits in its own way. And those limits, maybe the best way for them to do that is to put a cap on new first-time students. Maybe the best way for them to do it is faculty by faculty. That's usually how things go. You sort of see whether a particular department has the capacity to be taking on new students. I was driving past that institution just last week when the institute went to the union buildings to deliver our memorandum to stop citizen abuse. And I was just reminded upon entering Pretoria, sort of going past there, what a futuristic building the UNISA building looks like, and what a futuristic institution it is. It really had a great reputation around the world for making what we now call virtual learning, not just a hip idea, but a very practical reality for hundreds and thousands of people over the years. It had strong credibility. It had strong teaching. It's been white-anted to some degree, as so many sort of semi-state institutions have. I know a lot of people who have had very frustrating experiences with UNISA in the last couple of years, not having their tests marked properly, getting misleading or contradictory information from professors and so on. But there are still some strong, dedicated faculty and administrative staff. I think that its proof of concept has been taken up around the world in times of the plague and social distancing and all that. And what a shame that right now, when South Africa could be bragging about the fact that for years, for decades, we've had the answer to one of the world's great problems of how do you keep people learning when they can't all gather up in classrooms. We could really be holding a shining light to this country, to the continent, to the planet. Instead, we are on the brink of collapse. And in that regard, there's absolutely no question that this is EFF tactics through and through. I was there when Fallism had a nice bout at UJ and at WITS in 2014. I watched students harass, there are those students who want to go to school and learn, and those students who, I guess, want to start political careers with bricks in their hands to put through the window shields of their fellow students and to rip down the fence of the businesses that I was working. And there's just one little part of that anecdote which remains constantly interesting, which is that when the university security arrived, it was there to defend the students who were trying to break things, not the students who are trying to do things. And that kind of mushrooming of the problem is it's just a little vignette that captures the bigger issues that, so many people are so keen on taking the side of disruptors that there's hardly anyone left to shout out for people who just want to learn so that they can get skills, so that they can go and add value to the world.
Right. I think on your point of interference in the university, I mean, of course, we'll see what the court says as to whether the decision by the minister was, legal within his powers. But it's not as though the institutions haven't seen a lot of government sort of pressure and creep on their independence for a while now. Transformation targets, encouraging large intakes of students, encouraging students to pass. Some of that stuff is alleged, some of that stuff is definitely true. It has been going on for a while, and this is one of the first times I think I've seen the government acting in the opposite direction. And of course, the reason why so many people want to go to university in the first place is because high school is not really worth anything. If you want to get a job, you need a university degree at least, or else you're just going to sit amongst the millions of other unemployed South Africans, particularly if you're a young person. Herman, your thoughts on this, and anything to add to what Gabriel and I have said?
Yeah, no, I must say that one of the running frustrations I have with South Africa is, and especially South African educational politics and all that, is this obsession with university. I really take issue with this stigma that has developed, that the only way to get to success and the non-negotiable way to get there is through university studies. And if you get a university degree, or you go to university, then you are set for life. It's a very, very silly stigma that really doesn't take into account the whole concept of value add, and that you need to be trained to offer value so that you can make a living from that. And I think there's a conversation to be had about when universities went from being or where students went from being products delivered by universities to being clients deserving, buying the products and services of a university. And I'm not quite sure what that conversation will go and where I will be on what side or whatever, but it's definitely a conversation worth having to think fundamentally, what's the point of a university? Because I think if we actually get down to basics, most South Africans will go, well, the point of a university or schooling is so that you have marketable skills that you can earn a living. And then the question really becomes, well, then why do we have universities operating in this way in the first place? But I must say, I actually want to add two things. Firstly, that when government takes control of something, by its very nature, it has to make a call as to limitations of resources. That's why you get massive waiting times in the UK with the NHS, because it has the government, the state essentially there's a centralized authority to manage resources and stuff. So the moment you get into government doing something, you need to be willing to accept that government needs to draw the line somewhere. So I also think it's a very interesting question whether Bladen-Zimonde was acting outside of the limitations of his office by, limiting the numbers. But the fact of the matter is that you will have to limit the numbers if the state is involved in something. The state has finite resources, no matter what, saxophonists on Twitter say. And we need to get to a point where you realize that if you're going to demand A of the government, then it's going to have to use scarce resources in a certain way, and it can't just, say never-ending never-ending education for anyone. I must say, I personally would love this system where TVET colleges or education or, some of the basic stuff where you can say that's absolutely free tertiary education. The state will fund that. And the other stuff, lesbian dance theory or whatever, or even opera or music that I studied or law, I would need to pay for. I think it would be insane for the state to fund my music studies. And it didn't, and it shouldn't. But then, so that's the one thing. I think that we can really open the door here as to, if we have only 20,000 places, what do we do with that? What do we actually want to achieve as a country? But then there's a very cool quote that I just want to share here that comes from Ronald Reagan when he was governor of California, and there were the Berkeley protests in '69. And he said, all of it began the first time some of you who know better and are old enough to know better let young people think they have the right to choose the laws they would obey as long as they were doing it in the name of social protest. And I just think that's perfect. The academic world is going to now start suffering the consequences of, it's now going to start reaping the whirlwind. It sowed this idea of, protest ad infinitum. And I think you're just going to see the snake starting to eat its tail.
I like your sneaking in of an Arthur Harris quote there, Herman. Gabriel, just to wrap this up, any final thoughts you have, any response you have to what Herman said?
Yeah, no, spot on. Nicholas and I on Two Crickets and a Thorn Tree have spoken a bit about Mike Rowe, who is an American sort of construction worker guy who gets very deep into why you should become a welder or a plumber and not an English major, unless your parents have a lot of money or unless you're happy to be poor.
Right.
Which I, as a philosopher, kind of get. Good philosophy major. And just to add to his point, his point about budgeting, this is one of the more overlooked aspects of the budget speech that we got a couple of weeks ago, is that forecast expenditure on education was dropped by something like 120 billion rand, which is far outside the country's priorities. And one of the biggest line items on that was bursaries. So that's why Mboweni promised in Parliament, don't worry, any deserving kid will still find a way. And just almost no one seemed to look, everyone looked at the budget speech, almost no one seemed to look at the actual medium-term budget numbers. Sorry, mid-term budget numbers, which are the numbers that come at the same time as the speech, mapping over the next 3 years. And that's the period over which you see these cuts. And the government's promise is that, they're sort of cutting here, but giving back there. They're kind of just moving numbers around on an accounting book. But not clear that that's the reality. And my point there was that our government totally has to square the circle, which is not actually complicated. It's got to reduce expenditure and keep revenues stable, preferably by lowering some taxes. But it's got to reduce expenditure. It's just not at all obvious to me that cutting bursaries and so on is the way to do it.
Right, and we're still bailing out SAA. So that kind of tells you where the government's mind is at. All right, let's move on to what Herman is, I think, eagerly awaiting to speak about.
Nick, just one thing I want to briefly mention there, and this is why I love the idea of school vouchers so much, education vouchers, because it really gets the resources to where it needs to be. The problem here that you have, if this 20,000 cap is, above the law and Bladen-Zimonde could impose it, the reason is because you are you're not allowing the resources to go where resources actually should be going. And that's why something like a school voucher system or an education voucher system would be so perfect. Every single person who wants to go to UNISA can go to UNISA and say, right, you don't have to cap your numbers, because with me, I bring the resources you need to educate me. So I must say, there's just the frustration here is that there are really good solutions out there that I've received. Black South African mothers, every time we campaign on school vouchers, Black South African mothers phone me up for hours every week when we're campaigning on it, just to ask where can they get into this, because they want to take control, they want to do what's best for their kids, and they understand the resources need to go where the kid goes. So it's just a frustration that there are some solutions out there that South Africans grasp perfectly, but that politicians just are, incapable of ideologically entertaining.
Right. All right. Let's move on. So I'm sure people have come across it in the media. It is actually one of the most read stories on a lot of news sites. And this is the long-awaited interview that Prince Harry and his wife, Meghan Markle, I believe she's a Duchess. I can't remember exactly their titles, but anyway, it's irrelevant. Who have done the sort of, it's been described as a tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey. In it, Meghan Markle claimed various things. She said that her son Archie was denied the title of prince because there were concerns within the royal family about how dark his skin might be. She said they didn't want him to be a prince. And there were conversations about how dark his skin might be when he was born. She did not specify which member of the royal family said this. Neither did Prince Harry. Prince Harry said that his father cut him off financially, that his father, Prince Charles, cut him off financially and had let him down. Meghan Markle claimed that Kate Middleton made her cry on her wedding day. She said that she had been silenced by the firm, which is the name usually used to refer to the sort of the royal family. And Meghan Markle said she was pushed to, quote, the brink of suicide by the bullying she received there. And Harry says that he feels very isolated from his family because he has been literally cut off financially. And he says, Prince Harry said that his father, Prince Charles, is no longer taking his calls. Herman, what do you make of this? We've seen, since this has been said, Meghan Markle has essentially accused the royal family of racism, of being unfair to them, of being bullies. And since then, we've seen a lot of people in Hollywood and the media come out in support of Meghan Markle, saying that she's absolutely right and that this is, I think Serena Williams also backed her. Lots of high-profile figures. This is a big attack on the British monarchy.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever. I don't think I'm aware of a royal PR disaster of this scale. I don't even think not even Diana's death was this toxic, where you had a grandchild of the monarch and his wife attacking essentially the establishment and the institution and the royal family. But I must say that there's an interesting situation where a little knowledge is, always very useful. I mean, Meghan Markle seems unaware of the 1917 standard created by George V, where it was essentially established that the children and grandchildren of a sovereign automatically are entitled to the title of prince or princess. Now, the problem is Archie, the Meghan Markle and Harry Markle's son, he's not actually the grandchild or the child of a sovereign. The moment Prince Charles accedes to the throne, he becomes the grandchild of a sovereign, and then he is entitled.
Oh, we seem to have
similar with the
Herman.
title with it. Sorry, am I back?
I had a connection problem. Never mind. Carry on.
All right, cool. So once Charles acceded to the throne, he will be a sovereign, and then the George V standard kicks in, where any child or grandchild of the sovereign is entitled automatically to the title of prince or princess. Now, you have a situation here where you have Kate and William have their kids seem to have the royal titles, but they're in the they're in the direct line of succession. I mean, they are it's just a different situation. So firstly, the idea that he was denied princehood is just not factual. It's just nonsense. It's just a straight out lie. The second issue we have here is it's fascinating how well the Markles understand the lingo of wokeism and of victimism, because I think Nick Timothy wrote a brilliant opinion piece for the Daily Telegraph in which he made the point saying that the grandson of Her Majesty the Queen and a multi-millionaire actress have managed to portray themselves as the ultimate victims. And I just find that, quite nauseating, actually. If you're somewhere in Africa, somewhere in South Africa, for Pete's sake, and you have to walk because your nearest tap is a kilometer or two away, I mean, most people in the world would beg for the sort of victimhood and the suppression that these multimillionaires experience. I think it is so out of touch. And to think that, Harry said, no, they were cut off financially when they left the royal family. I'm like, yes. That is like wanting pocket money once you move out of the house. There are some rational ideas here that you just kick against. And if you look at their claims, they made about 8 claims. One, Prince of Wales stopped taking Harry's calls after the royal departure. I mean, that's a family thing. Why actually bring that out into the public? I think that's quite voyeuristic. 2, the Duchess of Cambridge made Meghan Markle cry before the wedding, she claimed. Well, that's a he said, she said. I made my sister cry. My sister made me cry. I mean, why do we need to air these things in public? 3, the couple held a private ceremony 3 days before the wedding when the Archbishop of Canterbury married them. Good for them. I mean, nice. That's a cute little story. 4, the Sussexes wanted Archie to be a prince, and he was denied that because of his skin color. Just nonsense. The Queen is somehow now at the center of a race row. And before we started recording, you said there is this race relations element to it. So it's right for us to comment. It's not just tabloid sensationalism. But what I find so fascinating is that the cry of racism is, and I follow the British press and the conservative right-wing British press quite deliberately and quite the Daily Express, Daily Mail, the Telegraph. These are your typical right-of-centre papers. And none of them had a problem with Meghan Markle's race at the time of the marriage. And all of them, in fact, praised the royal family for being willing to have a prince marry a commoner and a commoner of a different skin color. And then when she fell pregnant with Archie, there was this excitement that only British people can feel about multiracialism, that, we're going to have a mixed race royal in the blood of this 1,000-year-old lineage. And I just thought, to now turn and say, racism was all around us. It's just fiction. It wasn't there. Of course, you will find your odd Katie Hopkins dinosaur being, poisonous and toxic about this. But the idea that there's institutional racism and that the Queen and the royal family, just were worried, oh dear, there's going to be a mixed race child in the line of succession. My goodness, should we allow our ginger nut to marry their chocolate bar? No. I mean, it's just this whole idea that just is farcical and doesn't match up with anyone who followed the actual facts. So I'm just rambling now, but I think I made my point, and I shall now.
It's very good, Herman. It's very good.
I don't think we're gonna top ginger nut and chocolate bar. Gabriel, will the British monarchy, a 1,000-year-old institution, or longer actually, if you consider the Anglo-Saxon monarchs, but let's not get into that, was it going to survive wokeism?
Yes, it will. It will. I want to just read out a headline, which I thought was kind of funny, on the Daily Mail. US broadcaster Megyn Kelly, who people might remember was famous at Fox News, but then she challenged Donald Trump. Anyway, US broadcaster Megyn Kelly savages totally unself-aware Meghan Markle for saying she, quote, doesn't believe in grandeur, then inviting the Clooneys and Oprah to her wedding and covering herself in blood diamonds from a Saudi prince, end quote. So I think
that's a $5 headline, my word.
I mean, so has there been anything like this? Yeah, I mean, I'd say the Diana scandal was worse. There's still a lot of people I've noticed on comments where friends of mine, South African friends of mine, have made comments about this online. There's still a lot of South Africans who are laboring under the erroneous belief that the Queen somehow ordered the assassination of Princess Diana. Or
right. Sorry, can I just comment on that specific part? There was a part of this interview where Harry talked about how he felt that history was repeating itself in the same way that his mother, Diana, had sort of been chased and bedeviled by the media and then had died, and that this was repeating itself with Meghan Markle, and that's why they left the UK. One of the important things about that, though, was he said it very ambiguously, so that when I first read the headline, I thought he was basically suggesting that the Queen had a role in Diana's murder, which I thought was a very nasty way of putting it. Anyway.
And there's also the problem of, wanting to flee the media in the UK. So then you go to the US and have the biggest news interview, chat show interview with Oprah Winfrey. I mean, pick a side, people.
Well,
we interrupted you.
Yeah, there is something here going on between US and UK. But anyway, carry on, Gabriel. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. No, so I think that hypocrisy is running pretty deep. If you want to run away from the media, it's possible to do that. You stop giving interviews, and like it or loathe it, there will be people who follow you around a little bit for a while, but eventually they give up. There was a nice example given by Piers Morgan, British political commentator, of some famous actress. I think it was Sharon Stone, who really didn't like interviews, and you could tell because she didn't give them. James could see as much the same. He really doesn't like the media. That's why you haven't seen him on the media. You are in control, certainly, of going to Oprah or not. So I think, it's just worthwhile remembering the kinds of traumas that the royal family's been through. I think the biggest one in the 20th century is the abdication of, Hermann, correct me if I'm wrong here, Henry VIII, with the one that married the American divorcee.
No, Edward VIII.
Sorry, Edward VIII. That's what I meant. Yeah,
Well,
Henry.
Yeah, sorry, Henry killed his wives
because he wanted to kill his wives. Edward just wanted to marry an American divorcee, and that was hard for the firm. It was also, turns out, very useful because race politics was heavily involved in that as well. The 1920s and 30s were a bad time for racism around the world. Chamberlain, not the prime minister, but a writer, had become one of the world's most preeminent sort of race theorists. He was a Brit who was very well received in Deutschland and France. There were sort of competitions between top intellectuals of those countries to see who could have the greatest race nationalist sort of neo woke theory or old woke theory or whatever of which race is ultimately the most virtuous because it's been the most badly maligned by Jews or Irish Catholics or whatever. This was a grand competition of the day, and the Brits were doing well. And Edward VIII was somewhat sympathetic with that kind of talk, and it just was probably better for the Brits that they had a more steadfast, classically liberal royal in charge after that abdication. But the other consonance is that when one really does go against the rules of the British family, there has traditionally been this sort of, in the new age, where that doesn't mean some kind of genuine battle for power, where the regent's only real power is in the esteem market, is in the game of likes and dislikes, then you get like a separate tentpole, a sort of British family, royal family in exile, which then competes for the attention and the love and the praise of the main British family, royal family, and this competition is not going to go away because it falls so cleanly along the salient divides, right? You've got one family that's really about trying to play very straight, be very stiff upper lip, and not much more than cute photos with babies and the occasional wedding and sort of military procession and knighting thing. And the other one that's all about, the first interview that I saw Prince Harry give in the UK was with James Corbyn, a comedian. He goes and knocks on the house that they shot the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in, and Corbyn says, your house is from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and this is a real Fresh Prince. Can he go in? And the owners are sort of dazzled by the camera and the royal, and they say, oh, and Harry says, oh, please just let me in. I want to go make a wee. And then little Prince Harry goes in to make a wee, and then he sticks his head out of the toilet, like while he's making a wee. It's real sort of smutty, slapstick kind of attention grabbing Americana. It's so American.
Yeah.
So
yes.
We kind of have the American royal family. The Americans have always wanted a royal family. Now they've got them. This is what they do. They whine. They urinate in public. They call everyone a racist. And I think it's perfect. They must have tabloids and love this. It's the next progression after fake wrestling. It's the world fills in the gaps.
But I must quickly add
Herman,
something.
We don't have time, I'm afraid. So I'm gonna have to close it there. But thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this show, and we will have to see whether the royal family can weather the storm. Gabriel seems to be very confident in that assertion.
It'll
Anyway,
just make
thank you
the
very
Brit
much
of the UK even more, by contrast. That's my theory.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There we go. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow on the Daily Print Show.